Have you ever stood in a spiritual desert, a place where your prayers feel like they're hitting a ceiling of brass, and the only answer you hear is silence? Welcome to the Exile's diary. While the first part of the Psalms celebrated a king's victories, this second movement, chapters 42 to 72, begins in the shadows. It's the raw, unfiltered cry of a soul that is homesick for a God who seems 1,000 miles away. Today, we aren't just reading ancient poetry. We are stepping into the most honest confession ever written, the moment King David hit rock bottom and realized that a broken heart is the only way to let the light back in. Why does God go silent? And how do you find a rock that is higher than your problems when the ground beneath you is cracking? Don't turn away. The answer to your silence might be hidden in these ancient songs. Let's journey together into the heart of Book 2, the thirst of the exile, longing for the holy place. Welcome back to our journey through the heartbeat of ancient Israel. We have just finished the first major movement of the Psalms, and now the music shifts. If the first 41 chapters were the intimate struggles of a single man, David, then Book 2 opens with a collective cry that echoes through the centuries. Imagine you are standing on the edge of a vast, dry wilderness. You are far from home, perhaps, not just physically, but emotionally. You remember the good old days, the times when you felt close to your purpose, your family, or your Creator. But now, all you hear is the sound of your own heavy breathing and the taunts of those who ask, "Where is your God now?" This is the atmosphere of the sons of Korah. These were the temple singers, the musicians who lived for the presence of the Almighty. But in these opening chapters of Book 2, they are in exile. They are homesick for heaven, the deer and the desert. We begin with one of the most hauntingly beautiful images in literature, Psalm 42. As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. Think about that for a second. This isn't a casual thirst. This is a life or death desperation. Imagine a deer, exhausted, chased by predators, its throat parched and burning, searching for the one thing that can save its life. That is how the poet feels about the presence of God. His tears have been his food day and night. But notice what the poet does. He doesn't just wallow in the thirst. He starts a dialogue with his own soul. He asks the question we've all asked in our darkest hours. Why, my soul, are you downcast? Why so disturbed within me? He doesn't ignore his depression. He talks to it. He reminds himself to put your hope in God. It's a powerful lesson in American resilience. Not the kind that pretends everything is okay, but the kind that stares at the darkness and chooses to sing anyway. The fortress and the roar. As we move into Psalm 44, the tone gets even more grit and dirt real. This is a national lament. The people are saying, God, our ancestors told us how you performed miracles for them. But now we are being crushed. We are like sheep led to the slaughter. It is a raw, honest challenge to the silence of heaven. But then, out of that silence, comes the thunder of Psalm 46. If you've ever lived through a hurricane, an earthquake, or a season where your financial stability suddenly vanished, Psalm 46 is your anchor. It doesn't say the mountains won't fall into the sea. It says even if they do, we will not fear. Why? Because God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Visualize a city under siege. Outside the walls, the nations are in an uproar. The kingdoms are falling, and the earth is melting. But inside the city, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God. There is a quiet, deep peace that the world didn't give and the world can't take away. And then, the command that every busy, stressed-out modern person needs to hear: be still and know that I am God. It's not a suggestion, it's a divine interruption. Stop the striving, stop the noise, just be still. The wedding of the King. From the battlefield of Psalm 46, we are suddenly swept away to a royal palace in Psalm 45. This is a wedding song, a song of loves. It's cinematic, filled with the scent of myrrh and aloes, the sound of stringed instruments, and the sight of a king who is fairer than the sons of men. While this was likely written for a literal royal wedding, for thousands of years, listeners have heard something deeper. They hear the promise of a Messiah, a king who loves righteousness and hates wickedness. It's a reminder that the story of humanity isn't just a tragedy or a struggle, it's a romance. There is a king who is coming for his people, and the beauty of that union is what gives us the strength to endure the exile, the vanity of the world. Finally, this opening section of Book 2 closes with the sobering wisdom of Psalm 49. In a culture obsessed with wealth, status, and making it, the poet hits us with a reality check. He reminds us that no one can redeem their own life with riches. Whether you are a billionaire or a beggar, we all face the same final appointment. People who have wealth but lack understanding, he warns, are like the beasts that perish. It's a call to invest in the eternal, not just the temporary. It's a reminder that while the exile is temporary, the home we are longing for, the city of the great King, is forever. As we end these first 8 chapters of Book 2, we leave the wilderness and the dry streams behind. We've learned that thirst is actually a gift because it points us toward the water. We've learned that the roar of the nations is nothing compared to the stillness of God. And now, as we move forward, the focus shifts from our longing to God's judgment and his incredible, scandalous mercy. The God of justice and mercy, a heart shattered and rebuilt. We move now from the wide, sweeping landscapes of the wilderness and the royal wedding halls into a place far more intimate and frankly far more uncomfortable. We are entering the courtroom and the confessional. If the previous section was about the thirst for God, this section, encompassing Psalms 50 through 60, is about what happens when we finally stand face to face with the truth. In the American tradition of storytelling, we love justice, but we crave mercy. We want the villain to be caught, but when we realize the flaws in our own character, we want a second chance. This movement of the Psalms is the ultimate second chance story, the courtroom of the Almighty. The scene opens in Psalm 50 with a thunderclap. Imagine a courtroom where the walls are made of storm clouds and the judge is the creator of the stars. But this isn't a trial for the wicked outside, it's a trial for the faithful inside. God isn't angry because people forgot to perform rituals or bring sacrifices. He says, "I don't need your bulls or your goats. Every beast of the forest is mine." Instead, the judge is looking for something much rarer, a heart of gratitude. It's a powerful reminder that God isn't interested in our religious performances. He wants the real us. He wants a sacrifice of thanksgiving. He is saying, "Call upon me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver you." It's an invitation to move from religion to relationship. The broken king's confession. But then we hit the emotional epicenter of the entire book of Psalms, Psalm 51. If there is one chapter that defines the human struggle with guilt and the beauty of grace, it is this one. Picture King David. He is at the height of his power, but he has just committed the most devastating mistakes of his life, adultery and murder. He thought he had covered his tracks, but the prophet Nathan has just pointed a finger at his heart and said, "You are the man." The music here is a solitary, weeping cello. David doesn't offer excuses. He doesn't blame his upbringing or his stress levels. He simply cries out, "Have mercy on me, O God." He speaks of being washed whiter than snow. He asks for a clean heart and a right spirit. For anyone listening who has ever felt like they've gone too far, or that their mistakes have permanently stained their soul, Psalm 51 is a lighthouse. David discovers that the only sacrifice God actually wants is a broken and contrite heart. In a world that tells us to fix ourselves or hustle for our worth, David shows us that the way to wholeness is through brokenness. He finds that when we stop hiding, God starts healing. The fugitive and the betrayer. As we move into Psalms 52 through 59, the setting shifts back to the dangerous days of David's youth, when he was running for his life from King Saul. These are the Miktam's golden poems, written in the heat of battle and the cold of the cave. In Psalm 52, we meet a villain named Doeg the Edomite, a man who loved evil more than good. David watches as the powerful boast in their wickedness, but he declares, "I am like an olive tree flourishing in the house of God." It's a defiance against the bullies of the world. Then, in Psalms 54, 56, and 57, we feel the walls closing in. David is in Gath, surrounded by Philistines. He is in the cave, hiding in the dark. You can hear the fear in his voice. Be merciful to me, my God, for my enemies are in hot pursuit. But even in the dark, David does something extraordinary. He awakens the dawn. He decides to sing before the sun even rises. He trusts that God is collecting his tears in a bottle. Imagine that the God of the universe cares so much about your pain that he keeps a record of every single tear you shed. You are never crying alone. Justice for the oppressed. Psalm 58 takes a sharp turn towards social justice. David speaks to the rulers who weigh out violence instead of justice. It's a visceral, angry cry for God to break the teeth of the wicked. It reminds us that God is not a passive observer of evil. He is the protector of the weak. Then, in Psalm 59, we see David's house surrounded by assassins. He compares his enemies to howling dogs that prowl the city at night. But while they are howling, David is singing. I will sing of your strength. In the morning I will sing of your love. This is the recurring theme of this section. The morning always comes. The assassins might be at the door, but the fortress is secure. The banner of hope. We end this movement with Psalm 60. It's a song written after a military defeat. The earth is shaking, the people are reeling, and it feels like God has rejected them. But even in the middle of a loss, David sees a banner that God has given to those who fear him, a rallying point in the middle of the chaos. David realizes that with God, we will gain the victory. The defeat wasn't the end of the story. It was a setup for a deeper reliance on the only power that matters. This section, from the courtroom of Psalm 50 to the battlefield of Psalm 60, tells us one vital truth. Whether the threat is the sin inside of us or the enemies outside of us, the answer is the same. It is the mercy of a God who judges the heart but saves the soul. We have seen a king shattered and rebuilt. And as we move forward, we are going to see that this rebuilt king discovers a rock that is higher than any mountain he has ever climbed. The rock higher than I, finding anchors in the unknown. As we move deeper into Book 2 of the Psalms, the landscape shifts from the courtroom and the confessional into the wide-open, rugged terrain of the soul. We are entering a section, Psalms 61 through 68, that feels like a climb up a massive mountain. If the previous chapters were about surviving the slimy pit of our own mistakes, these chapters are about finding a high ground that the world can't reach. In our modern life, we often feel like we are standing on shifting sand. Whether it's the economy, our health, or the complicated social dynamics of our day, there is a constant sense that things are shaky. David, writing these words while his life was still very much in flux, points us to something solid. The view from the ends of the earth. We begin with Psalm 61. Imagine being so far from home, so exhausted by the chase, that you feel like you've reached the very edge of the map. David cries out, "From the ends of the earth I call to you. I call as my heart grows faint." Then he utters one of the most powerful prayers in the entire Bible. "Lead me to the rock that is higher than I." Think about that image. When you are drowning in a sea of problems, you don't just need a rock. You need a rock that is higher than you, something outside of your own strength, your own intelligence, and your own perspective. David realizes that his own rock isn't enough. He needs a divine elevation. He finds that when he gets to that higher ground, he can look down at his enemies and see that they aren't quite as big as they seemed from the valley. The power of silence. Then comes Psalm 62, a poem that feels like a calm center in the middle of a hurricane. In an American culture that values noise, hustle, and having the last word, Psalm 62 is a radical interruption. Twice, David says, "Truly, my soul finds rest in God alone." In the original Hebrew, the word for rest or wait implies a profound silence. It's the silence of a soldier who knows the battle is already won. David looks at his enemies who are trying to topple him like a leaning wall or a tottering fence, and he doesn't shout back. He doesn't defend his reputation. He just waits. He realizes that power belongs to God, and that human breath is just a puff of wind. This chapter teaches us that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do when you are under attack is to be absolutely still. Thirst in the desert, but stillness doesn't mean a lack of passion. In Psalm 63, we find David in the wilderness of Judah. If you've ever walked through the Mojave Desert or the dry canyons of the West, you can feel the grit in these verses. His skin is parched, his throat is dry, but his thirst isn't for water, it's for God. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. Stop and consider that statement. In a world that tells us that life is the ultimate prize, staying healthy, staying young, staying alive at all costs, David says there is something better than breathing. The steadfast love of God is more essential than the air in his lungs. Even when he is lying on his bed at night, thinking about his problems, he chooses to remember you through the watches of the night. He finds that even in a dry and weary land, his soul is satisfied as with the richest of foods. He discovers that you don't need a palace to be happy. You just need a presence, the bounty of the earth. As we reach Psalms 65 through 67, the camera zooms out once again to the entire planet. These are songs of harvest and global blessing. In Psalm 65, David looks at the mountains, the roaring seas, and the waving grain of the fields. He sees God crowning the year with a bounty. It's a beautiful pastoral vision of a creator who cares about the rain, the soil, and the flocks. It reminds us that God isn't just a God of the soul. He is the God of the physical world. He is the one who stills the roaring of the seas and the turmoil of the nations. Then, Psalm 67 echoes a prayer that reaches every corner of the globe. May the nations be glad and sing for joy. It's a vision of a world where justice and peace are the norm. It's a reminder that the blessing God gives to us isn't just for us. It's meant to flow through us to the ends of the earth. The grand procession. Finally, this section reaches a thunderous conclusion in Psalm 68. This is one of the most complex and energetic poems in the Bible. It's a military parade, a historical retelling, and a victory shout, all rolled into one. May God arise. May his enemies be scattered. David describes God as a rider on the clouds. He looks back at the Exodus, when God led his people through the wilderness. But look at the character of this mighty warrior. He isn't just a conqueror. He is a father to the fatherless, a defender of widows. He is the one who sets the lonely in families. This is the great paradox of the God of the Psalms. He is the one who commands the chariots of God, tens of thousands and thousands of thousands. Yet he is also the one who notices the orphan and the person sitting alone in their house. He is the rock higher than I, but he is also the one who walks beside us in the dust. As we end this movement, we are standing on the summit. We have looked out over the deserts, the harvests, and the history of a nation. We have found a stability that doesn't depend on our circumstances. And now, as we move into the final chapters of Book 2, we are going to see how this rock sustains a king who is facing his final, most difficult days, and the legacy he leaves for the generations to come. The king's legacy. Faith through the generations. We have reached the final movement of Book 2. If the Psalms were a movie, this would be the third act, the part where the sun begins to set, the shadows grow long, and the protagonist looks back at a life of scars and victories to ask, what will I leave behind? In this final section, spanning from Psalm 69 to 72, we move from the deepest, darkest water back to the heights of a golden kingdom. It's a journey that mirrors the human experience, from the raw desperation of our youth to the quiet, reflective wisdom of our final years. For our American audience, obsessed with legacy and the next generation, these chapters offer a profound perspective on what truly lasts. The deep waters of the soul. We begin with Psalm 69, and the atmosphere is heavy. Imagine standing in the middle of a flooding river. The mud is pulling at your feet, The current is slamming against your chest, and the water is rising past your chin. David cries out, "Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck." This is one of the most intensely emotional and messianic psalms in the Bible. David is suffering, not for his own mistakes this time, but because of his zeal for God's house. He's being mocked by drunks at the city gate. He's a stranger to his own brothers. He describes a moment of profound loneliness that centuries later would be echoed on a hill called Calvary. "They put gall in my food and gave me vinegar for my thirst." Have you ever felt like you were drowning in the opinions of others or the pressures of a life lived for the right reasons? David shows us that even when the flood waters overwhelm us, we can still talk to the water walker. He pivots from the drowning to the dancing, promising that God will save Zion. He realizes that his individual pain is part of a much larger story of redemption, the prayer of the silver hair. As the rhythm of the music slows, we enter Psalm 71. If you are in the second half of your life, or if you've ever looked at your parents and seen the toll that years of hard work have taken, this psalm is for you. It is the prayer of the aging saint. David, with silver hair and a body that perhaps doesn't move as fast as it used to, looks back. He remembers being sustained from birth. He thinks about the wondrous deeds God did when he was just a boy with a sling. But now, he faces a new kind of fear, the fear of being forgotten or becoming irrelevant. "Do not cast me away when I am old. Do not forsake me when my strength is gone." In a culture that worships youth and the new, Psalm 71 is a radical declaration of value. David realizes that his greatest contribution isn't his strength, but his story. He vows to tell the next generation about the mighty acts of God. He shows us that faith isn't a sprint, it's a marathon, where the most important miles are the ones near the finish line. He finds that even when the body weakens, the spirit can be resurrected with a new song of praise, the vision of the greater King. Finally, we arrive at the grand finale of Book 2, Psalm 72. The title says, "Of Solomon," but many believe this was David's final prayer for his son as he handed over the keys to the kingdom. It is a masterpiece of political and spiritual vision. What does the ideal leader look like? David doesn't pray for Solomon to have the biggest army or the most gold. He prays for justice. May he defend the afflicted among the people and save the children of the needy. Imagine a world where leadership is measured by how well the most vulnerable are treated. David envisions a kingdom where peace flourishes like the moon, where the grain waves on the mountain tops, and where the king's name endures as long as the sun. But as we read these soaring words, we realize that no earthly king, not even Solomon, could ever fully live up to this. This is a prophetic song. It's looking past Solomon, past the kings of Israel, toward a greater king whose reign will truly reach from sea to sea. It's a vision of the Messiah, the King of Kings, who will one day wipe away every tear and bring a justice that never fails. The closing Amen. The music swells for the final time. We reach the end of the second major division of the Psalms, and just like Book 1, this book ends with a formal doxology, a shout of praise that anchors everything we've just heard. Praise be to the Lord God, the God of Israel, who alone does marvelous deeds. Praise be to his glorious name forever. May the whole earth be filled with his glory. And then a final humble note from the scribe. The prayers of David, son of Jesse, are ended. Psalm 70, 2-20. We've walked through the thirst of the exile, the brokenness of the confessional, the heights of the rock, and the legacy of the old king. We've seen that Book 2 is a journey from the deep waters to the whole earth being filled with glory. David's personal prayers might be ending here, but the Song of the Psalms is far from over. As we prepare to move into Book 3, the perspective will shift again from the king's palace to the ruins of a nation, and the enduring hope that even in the darkest night of the soul, God is still the portion of his people. We have just traveled through some of the most intense valleys of the human experience, from the parched thirst of the exile to the golden legacy of a king. My personal takeaway from these chapters is this: the book of Psalms proves that God isn't looking for your perfect religious performance. He is looking for the real you. David and the sons of Korah taught us that it's okay to be thirsty, it's okay to be honest about your pain, and it's okay to admit you're broken, because it's in that very brokenness that God does His most marvelous work. Thank you so much for walking this path with me today. This community is a journey we take together, and I truly value every second you spend here. If this journey through Psalms 42 to 72 gave you a moment of peace or a new perspective, please smash that like button so we can reach more souls in the desert. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to join us as we head into the dramatic territory of Book 3. Share this with someone who needs to know they aren't alone in their struggle. And most importantly, comment below. Which verse or which psalm spoke to your heart today? Your insights help us grow and help me make these videos even better for you. Let's keep exploring these ancient treasures together. Until next time, stay rooted, stay hopeful, and remember, even in the silence, He is there. God bless.